Which piece of information you know because of your job or study will shock the average person? If someone has diarrhea or vomits in a pool, it doesn't need to be drained. In fact, draining the pool might even be less effective if proper disinfection procedures aren't followed after draining the pool. Instead, the chlorine level needs to be raised to at least 20 ppm for at least 23 hours after all physical pieces of vomit or shit have been removed. Doing this will kill any possible Cryptosporidium bacteria in the pool. What does 20 ppm chlorine feel like? Simply by putting your hand in the water to get a sample will cause your skin to dry up. Terry or photovoltaic panel is extremely hard to turn off once it gets started. Until the energy source is depleted, the battery does empty. The panel will go on until it burns or the night falls. It burns hot enough to either vaporize or detonate anything it comes into contact with. Obviously, there are protective measures in place to prevent this from happening. People have this annoying habit of thinking they are smarter than those things. In the US, women with finishing uni within a score have a harder time being recruited than those with a BB better than a better than C, and so on. This effect is not present with men. This is due to the fact that women succeeding too much at uni are perceived as cold, unfunny and nerdy in a bad way, whereas men with the same performances are perceived as funny, nice and cool to be around. The effect described above is in addition to a worse global perception on women and is more obvious and well known. The only video games that have an effect on children's likelihood to commit violence are sports video games and GTA. Basically any video game that mimics real life, day-to-day situations, with gratuitous violence added in. If they're just sports games where you can't body check, fight, hit, cuss, etc., they're perfectly fine for kids to play. But if they're sports games that spite fighting, hitting, etc., your kid is significantly more likely to fight. And GTA? Well, welcome to road rage and misogyny city. Because of ridiculously overt countermeasures by the government to minimize fraud and liability lawsuits, about 75% of what people in the social services field do is documentation. A slew of courses about sometimes completely unrelated subjects, filling out 10 documents to get one little thing done, and making revision after revision to ensure repayment by the source of funding. Depending on the item, consumer electronics have little to no margin, sometimes a negative margin. The money either comes from rebates from the manufacturer or from accessories. Just cause someone online has it cheaper doesn't mean it can be sold for cheaper. Insurance isn't always faceless businessmen in stores. Sometimes it's young people with purple and green hair who are open about fighting the man, looking for any loophole or interpretation to help the customer and still stay legal. Brokerages have supercomputers literally across the street from the electronic stock exchanges. The purpose of this is to see incoming trades and then use that information to front-run their orders by a few milliseconds. Imagine playing poker and being able to see your opponent's cards. The net effect is that billions of dollars are essentially stolen from retail and middle-class traders and raked into the accounts of institutions. This is somehow still legal. How rotten a lot of bridges are. I work in highway maintenance and quite a few of them are in hideous condition and are overdue for replacement. Either deck is more or less held in place by gravity and moves up and down independently of the structure beneath, which is coming misaligned because of a lateral force put on it by eroding riverbanks. Fortunately, that one is finally under contract to be replaced this year. CPR has dismal survival rates. 10 when initiated out of hospital, 17 in, and that when performed correctly, it usually breaks the ribs, and the longer someone is without oxygen to the brain, the more likely they are to have brain damage and related neurological complications. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be done, of course, but it's very unlikely that someone will just bounce back from CPR like they do on TV. I'm a mascot performer. People constantly want to talk about how hot it must be inside the costumes. that the truth is I don't feel the heat. Don't get me wrong. I take steps to avoid overheating and dehydration. But once you've done this job long enough, the temperature inside the costume just feels like normal. Before this, I was a journalist. I could talk about the misconceptions there, but that would require an essay. About 20 years ago, I worked for a printing co. with a contract with the Funeral Home Federation. We printed their everything, including a sheet sent out to funeral homes on wholesale casket pricing and the amount of profit to be made from the sale of each. Back then, a casket's wholesale cost was 10 of what they were charging consumers. So that $5,000 casket only cost them $500. I can only imagine the upcharge now. Forensic psychologists, there are so many horrendous crimes that happen that never reach the news mainstream media, and that there are trends in which crimes actually get reported. For example, domestic violence is very in right now, and a hot topic, so you will see a lot of that in the news. It's not that it's actually happening more than usual. The reporting is just skewed by what stories will actually sell. Nanomaterials in everyday products like sunscreen. Nobody really understands how they will interact with your body over the next 30-50 years. A nanomaterial version of a micron-sized particle behaves totally differently and can strongly interact at the cellular level. Many of the safety studies draw data from the bulk or micron-sized particles, or a very short term, in order to get the material into production. When you go to a restaurant and there are multiple empty tables, and they tell you there's a wait, it's because the kitchen is backed up. Sure, everyone says, I'll just wait at the table. Sorry, assholes before you who were given that opportunity and bitch incessantly about how long they've been there is why no restaurant will ever seat you in this situation, no matter how nice or patient you claim to be. Those stupid little pillows on the bed in a hotel room take millions of dollars to design. I had a designer change their mind after we had already ordered and manufactured 300 rooms worth of stupid pillows. So we had to trash them all and begin again. And because the design is proprietary to the designer and the hotel chain, they can't be donated or sold, they just go straight to a landfill. Many people are surprised to learn that the human brain produces enough electricity to power a small light bulb. This fact highlights the incredible complexity and energy efficiency of the human brain, which constantly generates electrical impulses to facilitate thoughts, emotions, and bodily functions. It's a fascinating insight into the amazing capabilities of our bodies. The USA and much of the Western world doesn't have a food supply problem. It has a greed problem. The USA has the world's greatest per capita food waste. Oversupply usually leads to lowered prices, but the food producers create a false sense of scarcity in order to keep prices up. Your food costs are a direct result of price gouging and collusion. Most major waterways globally are heavily monitored by VTS Vessel Traffic Services, which is global standards. Major waterways. Everyone knows you're there even if you don't announce your presence, and everyone is passing along your location and operating per the collision regulations that are, as well, global. Almost nobody expects to get admitted to a nursing home because they never feel like they're old. Similar for dying. You can tell someone that they are dying and will be dead soon, then say, what do you think you're going to do when you leave here today? And they'll rattle off some possible plans. You aren't going home. This is the last stop. Half of the world's population has a nutritional deficiency. 3 billion people can't afford a healthy diet. 735 million people go to bed hungry every day. Food and agriculture is responsible for a third of greenhouse gas emissions and a vast majority of deforestation, land use change, biodiversity loss, and freshwater withdrawal. Not telling your kids about going off to sleep for surgery because it's better if they don't know is horribly traumatic for them. The look of fear, confusion, and betrayal on their faces is unforgettable. They do so much better when things are explained to them in an age-appropriate manner. You protecting them makes it so much worse. There is an obscene amount of chemicals sprayed on your food to maximize yield while it's growing. Almost 100 of corn grown in the USA is genetically modified. Supermarkets use advanced algorithms to set prices. It has very little to do with the cost of goods or cost of doing business, and very much to do with demand manipulation. A married man dad will take his family on vacation to a location, there is someone for him to fuck online, and then just takes his family there and finds ways to sneak away into another room, a bathroom, wherever, to fuck this other person and then come back and kiss his wife and play with his kids. Expensive cars keep being expensive. The tires are expensive. The parts are expensive. The people who work on them are expensive. Buying a Porsche or a BMW isn't a one-time splurge. This might seem like a no-brainer to you, but I worked in a garage, and I promise I saw someone having that unpleasant realization every day. I work for a charity that supports victims of violent crime, particularly domestic abuse survivors. If you are a man coming to us, you will probably be treated really bad. Attitudes are definitely getting better, but the opinion that men are the abusers and can't be abused is extremely rampant. People in retirement homes have a ton of sex, both couples and widows. There is also a massively high rate of STDs amongst retirement home residents. Retirement homes have among the highest infection rate for STDs. They hold the power of Viagra and horny old people with nothing but time to kill.